Okay, this is going to be the advanced math sample test for Unit 2. This is going to be all degrees. Unit 3 we'll get into radians, but we want to get a foundation here with the unit circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a blank page. Now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to write this information down because you're going to reference it as we go. Okay, there are 3 triangles that you got to know. You've got to know the 30, the 45, the 60, all right, where this is the hypotenuse. We're going to treat this as the opposite in y, and the adjacent x, hypotenuse, opposite y, adjacent with x, hypotenuse, opposite with y, adjacent with x. All right, now, the hypotenuses for all of them are 2. Okay? 1 is always opposite the 30-degree angle. So 30 would be here, and 30 would be here. Okay? Square root of 3 is opposite of the 60-degree angle. Square root of 3, square root of 3, and this one is square root of 2, and the square root of 2. So you have to commit that to memory. I'll make sure we can see all that. Okay. Yep, that looks good. Okay? All right, so you got to know that. So that's going to be something we're going to reference. Okay? The other thing you got to know, all right, this is xy. Oops. This will be positive and positive in quad 1. This is 0, 360, 90, 180, and 270. Okay? This is positive and positive. Okay? This one, xy, this would be quad 2. This would be negative and positive. Quad 2, we work towards 180 degrees. Let me move that square root of 3 real quick so we're not confused. All right? In this quadrant, which is quad 3, x and y, this will be negative and negative. Okay? We also work to 180 degrees. Make that a little more clear. Hold on. Okay, xy, negative and negative, works to 180. Okay? This quadrant is quad 4, works to 360, xy, positive and negative. Okay? So you're going to reference this, so draw this out on your page, because I'm not going to go back to it every single time. Okay? So when I say, what quadrant is it in and what sign, right? Positive, positive, negative, positive. Okay? The next thing you want to look at, you want to have an idea of, is when it's at 0 degrees. Okay? What we're assuming here is h is 1. If I were to put a point there, x would be 1 and y would be 0 if I was labeling it. If I was doing this one for 90 degrees, h would be 1, x would be 0, and if I had a point labeled, that y would be 1. Okay? If I do this one, which is 180, okay, h would be 1. If I had a point here, that would be x would be negative 1, y would be 0. And then 270, okay, would be here. If I had a point on there, h would be 1, x would be 0, y would be negative 1. And you got to sort of have an idea of how coordinate points work. So those are the 3 things you really need to know as we go through. Okay? So, let's go back to our problems here. Okay, so it says, make sure I got all that. So what I want to do is make sure my angle is between 0 and 360. It is. So since it's at 0, that would be here. All right, so h would be 1, x would be 1, y would be 0. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Another way we can write that is x over h. So I got 1 over 1 would just be 1. Okay? Sine of 90, very similar. Okay? In this case, 90 degrees would be here. So h would be 1, x would be 0, y would be 1. Okay, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, or I can treat that as y over hypotenuse, so the y is 1, hypotenuse is 1, I have 1 there. Cosecant of 180, okay, all right, so 180, get a little messy here with this. Cosecant of 180 would be here. So what I would have here is h is 1, x would be negative 1, y would be 0. Okay? Cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite, or h over y. Okay? Just like with those triangles, we're going to make that assumption. So my h is 1, my y is 0, 1 over 0 is going to be undefined. Okay? All right? 1 over 0 would be undefined. Tan of 270, okay, 270 would be here. So my h would be 1, my x would be 0, and my y would be negative 1, because it's going down. Okay? Tan is opposite over adjacent, or y over x. So negative 1 over 0, that's also undefined. Let me just make sure everyone can see that. Okay? I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see that. All right, there you go. All right, so that's what you have to do with that. 180. Back to this one over here. All right, so 180 is on this side. So that would be h is 1, x would be negative 1, y would be 0. Cotangent is adjacent over opposite, which would be x over y. Okay, so that's negative 1 over 0, also undefined. Okay, so that's those problems. All right, now we're going to move into some of the other ones. 240. Okay, so I got the angle that's between 0 and 240. So the idea is I look at where's 240 located. Well, 240 would be located in this quadrant, quadrant 3. So what happens is I would compare that to 180, okay, and that's how I get the 60-degree angle. That would be my reference angle. So what I want to look at is that's going to be 60 degrees. All right, so H, O, all right, A, all right, so 60 degrees is here. So square root of 3, 1, and 2. Now in this quadrant, okay, in this quadrant, A will be negative and O will be negative. And you can see that here. Both of those are negative. All right, so what they want is cosine, which is adjacent over hypotenuse, which would be negative 1 over 2. Okay, cosecant, 210, same quadrant. We compare this with 180. So what ends up happening is that my reference angle is 30. Okay, so 30 degrees, that's 1, square root of 3, and 2. My hypotenuse, my opposite, my adjacent. Okay, and 210, once again, this is going to be negative and negative. All right, so cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite, so 2 over negative 1, which ends up being negative 2. Okay, 225, same quadrant. Okay, a lot of those, so I would compare that to 180. Once again, that'd be 45. So 45 degrees, I've had square root of 2, square root of 2, 2, hypotenuse, opposite, adjacent. Once again, both of those are negative. So I would have cosine, which is A over H, which is negative square root of 2 over 2. Okay? That's how I get that one. Okay, tan of 240. Okay? Hopefully you get some of these other quadrants here. Tan of 240 still compared to 180. So that'd be 60. So square root of 3. 1, 2, hypotenuse, opposite, adjacent. In this quadrant, both of those are negative. Tangent would be opposite over adjacent. So that's negative square root of 3 over negative 1, which would just be positive square root of 3. Okay? Cotangent of 30. Now, don't outthink yourself here. Okay? 30 degrees is in this quadrant. So this would go, I probably should have said that, to 0. So it's just going to be 30. Okay? So that's going to stay 30 degrees. Okay, 1, square root of 3, adjacent, opposite. 2 would be the hypotenuse. Cotangent would be adjacent over opposite, which is square root of 3 over 1, which is just square root of 3. Okay, everything's positive in that quadrant. 150, once again, in this quadrant here, I would be in quadrant 2. So once again, I'm comparing to 180. Okay, so that would be a 30-degree triangle. Oops. So that's going to be a 30-degree triangle. All right, 1, square root of 3, 2, my opposite, my adjacent. Okay, in that quadrant, 150, if you look at it, the x will be negative. So that's the only part I make negative. Now, they want the sign, which is opposite over hypotenuse, so 1 over 2. Okay? Now, 4/5, I'm sorry, 405. All right? Now, that's not an angle that's between 0 and 360. So what I would do is I would subtract 360, and I would get secant of 45. Okay? So you want to get an angle that's between 0 and 360. So 45 would be square root of 2, square root of 2. That's the adjacent, that's the opposite. Hypotenuse just would be 2. Okay? So in 45, all these are positive. Secant is hypotenuse over adjacent, so 2 over the square root of 2. Now, what happens is if you work out the algebra, it's 2 square root of 2 over 2, which ends up being just square root of 2. Okay, you can work out the algebra on this one. All right, 600. Okay, 600 you would want to subtract 360. You get cosine of 240. Okay, once again, I have a lot in that quadrant. Probably not a great thing. Okay, 240 would still go to 180, which would be 60 degrees. All right, 60-degree triangle. So it's the same triangle there. Okay, square root of 3, opposite, it will end up being negative. Negative 1 for the adjacent, 2 here. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so negative 1 over 2. Okay? 690, I would have to subtract 360. I would end up getting 330. Now, that's one of the first ones in that other quadrant. All right, which is good. We need some over there. Okay? In this quadrant, I would compare 330 to 360. Okay? Alright, so 300 to 360 would make this a 30-degree deal. So 30, 1, square root of 3, 2, hypotenuse, opposite, adjacent. In the fourth quadrant, the y is going to be negative. Okay? So cosecant is h over o, which is 2 over negative 1, which would just be negative 2. Okay? Negative 135. What I would have to do is add 360 there. So then that would turn into secant of 225. Once again, that would be in the third quadrant. So I compare that to 180, which would make that a 45-degree triangle. Okay? So I got 45, square root of 2, which is my opposite, square root of 2, which is my adjacent, 2 here. Since it's in that quadrant, it's this over this, negative and negative. Okay, secant would be h over a, so 2 over negative square root of 2, and it's the same deal as this other one. I would multiply, I would get square root of 2 over negative 2, and that's going to be negative square root of 2. Okay, all right, negative 120 degrees. Once again, I would add 360. So that would put me at tan of 240, a lot, too many in this. Sure, you do the sample test, so you get a little bit more than those other ones. Okay, so 240, it's a 60-degree triangle. Okay, square root of 3, which is the opposite, 1 adjacent, 2 hypotenuse. Okay, in that quadrant, both of those would be negative. Tan would be opposite over adjacent, which would be negative square root of 3 over negative 1. Which is square root of 3. Okay, so you just got to reference those triangles. I know this looks like a big bunch of jumble, but that's basically what happens on that. Okay, 720, what I would do is I would subtract 360, so that puts me at secant at 360. All right? So now I'm back at 360 would be here. So my h would be 1, my x would be 1, and my y would be 0. Secant would be h over a or h over x. We'll use that synonymously. So 1 over 1 would just would be 1. Okay? This one, I'd have to add 360 a couple times. So because I get to negative 180, add 360 again. So that's going to be cosine of 180. Okay? Once again, this way. Okay? H is 1, x is negative 1, y is 0. Okay? Cosine is a over h, or x over h, negative 1 over 1, which ends up being negative 1. Okay? That's how you get that one. All right? Moving on, 135. So we got to find all of these. Okay? Let me move that up as far as I can get it. That way I can work on the other parts. Okay, 135, I would compare to 180, which would give me a 45-degree triangle. Square root of 2, square root of 2, opposite, adjacent, and 2. In this quadrant, this is the only thing that's going to be negative. So my sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so square root of 2 over 2. Cosine is negative square root of 2 over 2. And tangent is square root of 2 over negative square root of 2, which would just be negative 1. Now, for cosecant, it's h over o, so that's 2 over the square root of 2. And what you could do, if you multiply that out, that's 2 square root of 2 over square root of 4, which is square root of 2 over 2, which is just square root of 2. Okay? If you know that this is going to turn into that, you can skip all that stuff. Same thing here, this would be 2 over negative square root of 2. Well, I know that that is just going to be negative square root of 2. This is going to be negative square root of 2 over square root of 2, which would just be negative 1. Okay? 210, once again, that's a comparison with 180. So I'd have a 30-degree triangle there. 1, square root of 3 and 2. Hypotenuse, opposite, adjacent. In that quadrant, these things are negative. Sine would be negative 1/2. Cosine would be negative square root of 3 over 2, adjacent over hypotenuse. This would be negative 1 over negative square root of 3. What's going to end up happening there? All right, you multiply by square root of 3 top and bottom, and that's going to turn into square root of 3 over 3. Okay, positive is negative over a negative. Secant, or cosecant, is hypotenuse over opposite, so negative 2 over 1, which would just be negative 2. This would be 2 over negative square root of 3, which if you did the math out, okay, would turn into negative 2 square root of 3 over 3. Okay, if you need to see that, this is what it would look like. Okay, you'd multiply by square root of 3, top and bottom, so that's negative 2 square root of 3 over square root of 9, which that would turn into that. So if you know that it turns into, you're fine. This would be adjacent over opposite, so that's just going to be positive square root of 3. Watch your double negatives. Okay, I don't think I have anything on this page. Let's go to, I think this is it, the last page. Okay, 270. Okay, so what I want to look at here on this, all right, let me move that all the way down. All right, so at 270, what my assumption would be is that h would be 1, x would be 0, y would be negative 1. The reason that being, if I had a point here and plotted it, those would be the 2 coordinates, and that's my assumption. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse, or y over h, so negative 1 over 1, which is negative 1. Okay, cosine is a over h, or x over h, that's 0 over 1, which would just be 0. Tangent is opposite over adjacent, or y over x, so negative 1 over 0, which would be undefined. Okay, cosecant is h over o, or h over y, so 1 over negative 1 gives me negative 1. Oops. Okay, secant is h over a, okay, or h over x, so 1 over 0, which would be undefined. And then cotangent is adjacent over opposite, okay, which would be x over y, which would be 0 over -1, which would just be 0. One of the big things to know is undefined turns to 0, 0 turns to undefined. The numbers stay the way they are. Okay? This -360, what you would want to do is you'd want to add 360 to it, which puts you at 300. Okay? I'm going to compare to 360, so it ends up being a 60-degree angle. All right, so 60, square root of 3, 2, and 1. Okay? Hypotenuse, opposite, adjacent. In this quadrant, the y ends up being negative. Remember, this is going to be considered the y. Okay, so sine would be negative square root of 3 over 2. Cosine would be 1/2, adjacent over opposite. Tangent would be opposite over adjacent, which would just be negative square root of 3. Cosecant is 2 over negative square root of 3, and we saw from the last one that it would turn into this. Secant would be 2 over 1. And cotangent would be 1 over negative square root of 3, which we showed that that was negative square root of 3 over 3. Okay, all this is done without a calculator. All right, last 3 problems. Cosecant. Okay, so what you do is cosecant would be h over o. So that's 25 over 24. And the Pythagorean triple is 7. You can use Pythagorean theorem. You probably should just eventually know those for that. Quadrant 2, this will be negative, the x. Okay, so when I use this term, okay, I'm using this as x and this is y. Makes it a little bit easier. Okay. All right. So sine would be 24. Would be 24 over 25. Cosine would be negative 7 over 25. Tangent would be 24 over negative 7. And these just flip around. 25 over 24, 25 over negative 7, and negative 7 over 24. The nice thing about the triples is they're already reduced. Okay? Tangent, okay? So tangent would be opposite over adjacent. So 4, 3, triple is 5. Okay? Quadrant 4, this is going to be negative. Okay? So sine would be negative 4 over 5. Cosine would be 3 over 5. Tangent would be negative 4 over 3. Okay? Cosecant would be 5 over negative 4. Secant would be 5 over 3. And cotangent would be 3 over negative 4. Okay? And I think you guys know those ratios. Okay? Alright, last one here. I got cosine, which is a over h. So 12. The triple would be 5. Okay, this is h, o, and a. In quad 3, both of these would be negative. So sine, negative 5 over 13. Cosine, negative 12 over 13. Tangent would be negative 5 over negative 12, which is this one's the only one you got to watch out for. The negatives reduce. Okay, this would be 13 over negative 5. This is 13 over negative 12. And this would be negative 12 over negative 5, which once again is 12 over 5. Okay, the big thing is with this is you've got to understand these ideas. You've got to be able to draw out both the triangles and how the reference angles are finished out. This you use 180 to subtract. This you use 180 to subtract. This to 0, this to 360. If you have that written out in your paper, you should do fine. Remember, this is going to be no calculator.